With us tonight, Ed Miliband, promoted to the Cabinet last week as Cabinet Office Minister at 37, one of its youngest members. The broadcaster and Big Brother host, Davina McCall. Sayeeda, soon-to-be Baroness Warsi, appointed this week to the Shadow Cabinet, responsible for social cohesion. Douglas Murray, the neoconservative author. And Charlie Bell, winner of our nationwide search for a young panellist. Well, welcome to this very special edition of Question Time from London, the Schools Question Time, co-produced by students who won the Schools Question Time Challenge. They've been working with our producers here over the past few weeks to put together the programme. For the second time running, they decided to look for a member of the public to have a seat on the panel, something we're often asked to do. We had a national competition, we had auditions, and the winner of the seat was Charlie Bell, 18 years old, on his way to study medicine at Cambridge University. The students also had a big input into the makeup of this panel, which is why, as you'll see, I'm the only one with white hair. They also decided the audience tonight would be between 14 and 22, which I suppose is the Big Brother audience, Davina, pretty much. If you want to comment during the programme, as always, you can do it. A text to 83981, CFAX page 155. If you select that, we'll tell you what others are saying. You can email us at our website, of course. Our first question tonight. Tom Johnson, please.
Has the UK become a terrorist target because of its culture or because of the actions of its government abroad?
Douglas Murray.
Well, I'd first of all say absolutely not to do with our actions abroad, but put that in with one rider. If it were the case that because of our foreign policy people think they have the right to blow up people going to nightclubs and to blow up those fleeing from the first blast, as seems to be the case, then I'd say you have a choice in front of you, much like the choice we had a few weeks ago over whether or not Britain, the British state, has the right to decide who gets knighthoods, or whether crowds in Pakistan who burn books they can't read have that right. And we have the same choice now, which is whether or not British foreign policy will be run by the British government in the interests of the British state, which I think is the case, or whether or not we just allow other people who let off bombs here or in Baghdad or anyone else who want to terrorise us, whether we allow them to run our foreign policy. That's the choice before us.
But what's your answer to the question? The cause of the terrorism?
Is that the cause of the terror is Islamist fundamentalism, which is a version of Islam, a politicized version of Islam, which is wreaking havoc across the globe and has been doing so for many years, and which was aiming to attack this country and our allies before the invasion of Iraq, before the invasion of Afghanistan, and indeed even before 9/11. That is the truth.
Sayeeda Warsi.
I think that there can never be any justification for the use of violence against civilians, and I think we need to make that point very clear, and I'm sure all of you in this room would agree with me on that. But there are two separate issues that you asked. Is the culture issue that you raised. I think there is a concern about culture in this country. I think that it's a concern about what it means for us to be a British people today, and whether we're comfortable about our identities. And certainly my role as Minister for Community Cohesion, I will be looking at ways in which we as British people have ease within each other rather than feeling uncomfortable, which I understand that some communities are. In terms of foreign policy, I think it's quite right for us to raise legitimate concerns about our foreign policy, but I don't think it's right to make that link then to say, well, because of that, people have the right to come and wreak violence in our country.
But hang on, nobody was... you promoted yourself to minister. I think you meant shadow minister.
Shadow minister.
Yes, not quite there yet, no. A little way to go. But the question was whether we're a target because of the actions of the government, not whether that legitimises terrorism. Isn't that right, Tom Johnson? Where's Tom Johnson? Yes.
Yeah, and I'd say to Douglas, I mean, I agree, fundamentalism is bad. I think we're pretty much all agreed on that. But you didn't really answer the question of why fundamentalists turn on this country specifically as a target.
Because they hate this country, and they hate our allies, and they hate the West. And if you don't believe me, listen, at least do them the decency of listening to what they say themselves. Read the Hamas Charter. Read what Mr. bin Laden says. Read what the Muslim Brotherhood would do in this country. Read it and believe them.
Davina McCall. Hold on, I'll come to you in a moment. Davina.
Well, as a sort of non-political person, I would have to say that I feel that that's twaddle, because actually... I haven't read the Hamas Charter, and I wouldn't imagine many people here have, but it does seem that hate breeds hate. And our foreign policy has been to go into countries that aren't waging war with us and going completely nightly.
Afghanistan?
Yes. No, but Afghanistan itself as a country did not wage war with us.
No, it allowed terrorists to breed
No,
there, as
but
did Mr. Hussein.
that's not waging war with us. That's something completely different. No, I'm sorry.
They train... A state which allows training camps, from which training camps they come and attack us in our cities in London, New York and Washington. That matters.
How would you feel about diplomacy? Or is that a swear word in your book? Wouldn't it be better, rather than just going and sort of bombing everybody and our foreign policy, being a complete laughingstock? Well, there is jihad as well, but surely it's hate breeding hate. And at some point, somebody's got to turn around and say, come on, let's all sort of say...
All right, the woman in green there.
I think we have to look at the issue of where does fundamentalism come from. I mean, throughout history, it's always been shown that wherever there's poverty, and basically we've waded into Iraq and Afghanistan and desecrated their homeland and ruined their lives. So no wonder they're turning to these options, because we've taken away their livelihood.
So you think it's the war?
Absolutely.
All right, Charlie Bell.
I have to admit, I'm amazed that this hadn't already come up on the panel. The problem with fundamentalism is not simply some people wanting to hurt us because that's the way they're made. I think we are in some way responsible for the way that these people are acting. The culture of this country is a great culture, but we are going across to other nations and we are portraying ourselves as America's sort of very weird ally. And but we're going in there and trying to promote our way of freedom, which isn't what they agree with, and we're promoting it in such a vile way that they are looking back and saying, this isn't what we want. Why would we want to have a democratic state like this? We've got to give people options, and we've got to look at the causes of the fundamentalism, not just go, oh, they're breeding in Afghanistan.
All right,
Who's making that
Okay. Ed Miliband, we're promoting our freedom in a way that, in effect, stirs up terrorism against this country.
I don't agree with that, David. Look, I find it very hard to get into the minds of people who would willingly blow up a whole set of people at Glasgow Airport and at a nightclub in London. And when you read about what the leaders of Al-Qaeda stand for, it is an extremist ideology, which it's not about Western values, it's a whole set of values of freedom and tolerance and liberty that they're against. Now, having said that, it is the case that they use conflicts, like in Iraq, like the situation in the Middle East, to recruit people to their cause. Now, what's the duty on us, the British government? It seems to me the duty on us is to say this is not a clash of civilizations. This is not about different faiths against each other, or different races against each other, or different religions against each other. It is about saying that we care about people around the world and the fairness and justice around the world, whether in the Middle East or elsewhere. And that means that we must step up our efforts on diplomacy in the Middle East and elsewhere, because we need, in order to win people's hearts and minds, I think, we need to show that we stand for a set of values that all reasonable people can unite behind.
But do you agree, to come to the nub of the question, do you agree with the Joint Intelligence Committee that the conflict in Iraq exacerbated the threat from international terrorism and reinforced, I quote them, the determination of terrorists to attack the West?
Yes.
Are they saying that's in Iraq?
Yes.
Well, look, there's no
question. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, there is no question that in Iraq itself, lots of terrorists are now there, and there are sectarian conflict in Iraq, and that is posing a threat to British troops.
Sorry, by the conflict in Iraq, we must mean the invasion of Iraq by the Americans and the British forces, mustn't we?
Well, Iraq has become a centre of terrorism and a centre of conflict.
As a result of that action, do you think?
Well, not as a result of the action, but...
centre of that before.
Look, it has become a place where there is a big war on terrorism being waged. Now, the question for us, I think, is we've established a set of obligations to the Iraqi people by being there. Now, you could say, well, let's just get out immediately. I don't think that would be the right thing to do, personally, because I think having gone in there and being there now at the behest of the Iraqi government, we have a set of obligations we have to fulfil to them.
That isn't quite the question. The question was about causation, not about what you do now. The person in white there, the man in the white T-shirt, you, sir. Yes, fire away.
Hi, well, surely it's a bit of both. I mean, without a doubt, Iraq and Afghanistan have exacerbated the problem, but 9/11 happened before any of it. There was obviously hatred and resentment against Western civilization before Iraq or Afghanistan. Look at the embassy bombings in Africa. There were terrorist attacks happened before.
Were there attacks on Britain before?
No, there weren't. But if you want to look, if you say that we're so closely tied up with America, then surely kind of our policies and theirs, it works together.
Okay, the woman at the back there, on the two away from the gangway. You.
Do you think withdrawing troops from wherever all around the world now is going to resolve anything at the moment if you just bring them back out? Do you not think the damage has already been done? Do you not think that if we are going to withdraw them, then we should have withdrawn them before we started?
Do you think they should now be withdrawn? Is that your view?
No, I don't know exactly what to do. I think if we take everyone out now, then it's just going to kick off again. But if we don't, then what are we going to get ourselves into?
The man in the second row here, you, sir. Yep.
Are British troops in Iraq there for military reasons? Because there's only 5,000 of them, and I don't think they can fight against 100,000 or 150,000 Mahdi army people. I don't think they're there for military reasons.
Well, first of all, we're there for as long as the Iraqi government wants us to be there, which is until the area that they're in is secure, and I think we have to abide by that obligation. Two things. First of all, Ms. McCall referred to that not having read the Hamas Charter. If you are going to comment on this, you could at least do the people who desire to kill you the decency of trusting their word. And I can tell you that if the people who are attempting to bomb London and Glasgow and are currently wreaking havoc in Baghdad and across the world, if they had their way, I can assure you your own career wouldn't be going the way it is. You wouldn't be the woman you are. You wouldn't be allowed to do what you do in this country. That is the same, and that is the same for everyone in this room. And you should not be, and you should not take that for granted. And one other thing, I should just add to that. There's been a lot of cynicism in this room about this already tonight. But our troops in Iraq did not only go into Iraq for one reason. The people of Iraq had been living under a totalitarian dictatorship for decades, and many people thought that that was our fault. We get blamed when we intervene and when we don't. It was the same in the Balkans. We get blamed when we intervene and when we don't. If you...
All right. Davina McCall.
I agree that there was a dictatorship in Iraq before we went in, but this dictator, although he was an extremely bad man, did seem to hold the country together in some way. That now that we've gone in, there is complete civil war in the country.
But the question is about terrorism in Britain and the cause of it.
The cause was that it has been exacerbated by our foreign policy, and what we need now is a quick withdrawal from Iraq, to settle it down, quickly withdraw, and I would like a public inquiry, please.
I do want to come back. I think I have to take issue with a lot of what Douglas has to say, because we can look at the cause of it, or we can actually say this is a problem that we have here right now, like Ed has said, and how are we going to move forward? And I think the use of the language that you use, Douglas, actually makes it worse, and it makes communities in this country. It makes communities in this country feel as if somehow they're outside the big tent of Britain, and that creates more resentment, which creates bad community cohesion, which means we will never win the hearts and minds to defeat terrorism.
Were you opposed to the war?
Yes, I was.
You were, and remain? I mean, you still feel it was a mistake?
My views about the war are very, very clear, and I think it was a mistake.
And you agree that attacks on our troops are absolutely reprehensible?
No, I don't. Douglas, you know, you kind of make these links.
Ed Miliband.
Do you or not?
Ed Miliband, Davina McCall says there should be an inquiry into why the war happened. Do you think there should be an inquiry?
I think there will come a time when we need to find a way of learning lessons, not, in my view, when the troops are still there, because I think the concentration has to be on the work the troops are doing to actually train the Iraqi army, to the gentleman who asked the question, in order that they can patrol Iraq as best they can.
OK, I'll take one more point here and move on to another question. You say yes, with the spectacles.
How do you expect to win the hearts and minds of the Iraqi people and people across the world when it's come out today that one of the main reasons Australia went to war in Iraq was for oil?
You know, that hasn't come out today. That hasn't come out today, sir. The war was not about oil. If it were, we wouldn't have spent all these billions of dollars in lives and blood and treasure. It was not done for oil. We could have got oil by doing a deal with Saddam like Monsieur Chirac did.
OK, let's move on. Right, and moving on to another question. A quarter of our time's already gone. Richard Martin, please.
Is the live Earth concert an effective way to raise awareness on climate change or just celebrity hysteria?
This is the series of 7 concerts taking place at the weekend, Live Earth. Davina McCall, is it hysteria or is it a serious way of raising awareness?
I sort of feel that there are a lot of concerts happening at the moment. Last weekend we had Diana, and then we had Live 8 a couple of years ago or last year. And my feeling is that we're sort of diluting the power of having a massive concert. However, raising the idea of climate change and the problems that we have is a good thing, but is anything really going to happen? Actually, what we need, I think, is a bit of kind of government leadership to show us what to do. We're all sort of doing our little bits here and there, and we need packaging in supermarkets to go down. We need sort of clear action, not a concert.
Richard Martin, what did you mean by celebrity hysteria? Did you mean celebrities getting on the bandwagon, or did you mean celebrities being hysterical about climate change? I wasn't quite sure.
Celebrities getting on the bandwagon. I mean, a lot of the bands that doing this concert have really big carbon footprints, and they probably won't want to be told that they can't fly to London to do a gig because it's going to affect the climate. So,
okay. Charlie Bell.
Yeah, picking up on your point, I don't think anyone should be told that they're not allowed to fly anywhere because of climate change. I think that's missing the issue completely. I think we should be going back to the grassroots of the problem. Climate change is being caused because we're producing too much carbon dioxide, because of all the other emissions that we're giving out. And I think it's up to governments as much as it is up to us. We can make a big song and dance out of it. The government was in charge of the Make Poverty History campaign, or it was part of their campaign. They made a big thing about the Live 8 concerts. I haven't seen the government, or indeed the Conservative Party, making a big deal out of the Live Earth concerts. And I think it's up to government to put in the resources. I want to drive a car which doesn't pollute the atmosphere, but I can't do that until the investment's been put in. I pay my taxes. I want the investment now.
Okay. Ed Miliband, we can all make a song and dance of it, as indeed Live Earth is going to be. But is it effective?
I think it is effective, actually, because, look, a concert on its own doesn't change the world. But what we saw with Live 8 and Make Poverty History is that political movements, social movements, mobilising people does change things. And in the case of the environment, it changes things in 2 ways. First of all, by putting pressure on governments. You see, change doesn't happen because governments necessarily want it to happen. It happens because people demand that it happens. Yes. And that's why I think the Live Earth concert is important. And secondly, Live Earth speaks to something else which is very important, which is that partly climate change is about our own individual responsibility. And young people, many in this audience, are, in my view and my experience, much better than older generations at understanding how important the environment is and how we all need to act. So I think that a concert won't change the world, but the mobilisation and the movement that is part of Live Earth can change the world.
Okay. Look, the woman in the 5th row there, you, in the... Yes.
Where have you been in the last 5 years if you don't know about global warming and all this already? What is the point in another concert?
Sayeeda Warsi.
I agree with Ed, actually, because it's not that this concert will resolve anything, but what it will do is I think it will engage more people, and you'll be surprised there are a lot of people who are still not engaged in this debate. And I remember growing up as a young person, the one thing that did move me was the Band-Aid and the song and the whole issue around poverty in Africa, and that mattered to me because it was something that connected with me as a young person, and I feel that it is something like the film by Al Gore, like the film we're expecting from Tony Blair and Amitabh Bachchan and all the others, Sienna Miller. I think all these things will actually put this matter there on the agenda, make it an issue which people are clearly aware of, and it's actually people who will then force governments to take action.
Bob Geldof said it was a waste of time.
That's Bob Geldof.
Well, he began the concert route, didn't he? What do you think? The woman in the front here.
Do you not think, I mean, it's all very well saying that the Band-Aid concert was very effective, but do you not think that
the more concerts we do, the more it's beginning to hide the actual cause behind them.
Yeah, and I think there is a problem of that, kind of becoming tired of it, oh, this is another concert about another cause. But I think right now, if it's going to raise awareness and there's no harm being done by that, and a lot of people are going to get together and enjoy themselves, then so be it.
56% of people, according to a Mori poll today, still believe the experts are divided on whether it's human activity that is warming the planet anyway. So the issue is in dispute in the public mind.
Well, I think that's just an excuse by people to not do their recycling because they read somewhere that, 10% of scientists say that it's not down to us, so I'm not going to bother this week. But actually, everybody's got to make a concerted effort.
You mean everybody's got to agree with you?
Yes.
Why?
Because I'm right.
Douglas Murray.
Well, I don't want to make the lady in the fifth row unpopular by agreeing with her, but it is the case. I think this is just another concert. And look, it's no coincidence that there have been so many concerts in good causes. Look, never before has good work been so much fun. It's no surprise that, it's concerts that keep on happening. People get to feel they're doing their bit. I'm fighting global warming. I've bought a ticket. I sent a text message to make poverty history. And you feel better about yourself. But it's not enough.
Do you believe in global warming as caused by man? That's the point. Is it a cut-and-dried issue? Because poverty in Africa was a cut-and-dried issue they wanted to draw attention to.
This isn't a cut-and-dry issue. And is global warming happening? I think it is. But is this due to human agency, and can we change that? I'm not sure that we can. Okay. There seems to be a universal idea that it's otherwise.
The man in the white shirt in the middle there, if you can get to there. Yes.
Do you think government should be doing something now? Climate change isn't coming. It's not going to be in 5 years, 6 years. It's now. All you have to do is look at what's happening in our country with regards to floods to realise climate change, you can't plan for the future. You need to plan now. It's happening. It's here right now.
So we always
hold on. It was a question of the government. Ed.
What I would say to this gentleman is that we are trying to do two things. First of all, there's a bill in Parliament to say that by 2050 and going down gradually over time, we have to reduce our carbon emissions by 60%. And for the first time, just like you have a financial budget, there will be a carbon budget. And that is supported by all parties. But secondly, and this is very important because Britain is only 2% of global emissions, for the first time, we have got all countries to agree that they will establish a new agreement on climate change by 2009. Now, you're right. It should be happening quicker. You're right about...
What about the US? They're one of the biggest polluters in the world.
Sure. And look, what I would say about that is that we have a massive job internationally, and this is about us. We have a massive job to persuade the US population that climate change is a real and immediate threat to them. Now, I think something like Hurricane Katrina, which was a tragic event, has started to change opinion in the US, but the US political leaders, lots of people won't like George Bush, but the US political leaders are doing actually what where their populations think they should be. We need, internationally, and that's why I think Live Earth can play a contribution, we need to change opinion in the US, and that can only be done by the kind of movement I'm talking about.
Okay.
What about at home? Sorry.
No, go on. You go on, and then the person there, and the woman there, in green. That's you. Yeah. Speak away.
Hi there. Mr. Miliband has just said that...
Can't see from here.
Mr. Miliband has just said that popular opinion is an effective pressure on government in terms of climate change. Why then won't he commit to an 80% reduction in the climate bill, as the Big Arse campaign has campaigned for?
Well, that is something that is being looked at, actually. I mean, we've published a draft bill, and there's consultation going on, and it's for the person who's in charge of the environment in government to make that decision. But that is something that is being looked at, and I don't think anyone's in any doubt that we need to set a very stretching and demanding target.
Is that your brother who's in charge of that?
He used to be, actually.
Yeah. What did he do?
Well, I think not that I'm here to defend my brother, because you always ask me about my brother, but, he introduced, with cross-party support, and I acknowledge that, the first climate change bill. As I said, the first time we've got a carbon budget for the UK, as well as a financial budget.
The woman there, in the four-in, yes, in blue, pale blue, yes.
It'll be more effective if these pop stars, if they actually practice what they are preaching, rather than come to a concert, sing, and then go back to their research.
Right, let's take another question. Poppy McPherson, please.
Should the West now have a more sympathetic approach to Hamas in light of their involvement in the release of Alan Johnson?
In the light of Hamas's involvement in the release of Alan Johnston, should the West now take a more sympathetic approach to them? Well, Douglas Murray, you better start on that.
Well, the answer is no. Of course not. I'd like to know who it was who was booing in the audience. I'd like to know who the Hamas supporter is in the audience here. Hamas is a terrorist organisation which makes a fetish out of the murder of Jews. And I'd like to know who it was who thought that that movement was a good thing. This, incidentally, if you don't mind Jew murder, let me tell you what these people were doing just a couple of weeks ago to their own co-religionists in the Gaza, where they went to their next-door neighbours and threw people off buildings and shot people in the back when they were running away. And you think now this is a rehabilitated organisation because they posed for the release of a journalist? Because they posed and organised that to look good?
Sayeeda Warsi, do you agree with that?
I don't understand Douglas, most of what he says. I mean, I appreciate the comments that you make, but Douglas, you make them with such venom and such bizarre language. No, you know, with bizarre language that it really doesn't help.
I'm sorry, you can cozy up with Hamas,
Douglas,
you can hug Hamas if you want.
Douglas, you've had your fair share. Let us speak. Sayeeda.
It doesn't help. We need to look forward for things. I think that I actually welcome the fact that Hamas were actually involved in the release of this person, and it was the first step. But we must be very clear about Hamas in terms of moving forward. Should we appreciate them? Well, I hope that any organisation would help in the release of a hostage, and I think that we need to be very clear about this. In the recognition of Hamas, the principles, the quartet principles, have been very, very clear. Hamas, if it is to be a responsible government, must recognise the State of Israel. It must denounce violence, and it must be prepared to accept previous peace agreements. So what we have to send out the message to Hamas is, this is a first step, but you know what the table rules are, and if you're prepared to come to the table, then maybe we can think about it.
How do you distinguish between them and the way we negotiated with the IRA?
I think we said exactly the same.
Without them doing any of these things?
No, well, we did. We made it very, very clear. They have to denounce violence, they have to be prepared to put down their arms, and they have to be prepared to recognise. I mean, they were not saying that they do not recognise the existence of Britain or did not want that state to exist.
They were committed to a united Ireland, and they didn't have to give up that claim during the negotiations.
And Hamas still have Mr. Shalit.
Anyway,
they still own Mr. Shalit.
Okay, the answer to your question is no. There should be no change in policy. But I think the question that we need to look at now is, why haven't we been negotiating with them from the start? Now, okay, I understand all the points. They are a terrorist organisation, and they are causing horrific acts of violence there and killing way, way too many people. One person is too many. Way, way too many people. But no, the issue is, we asked the Palestinians, one of the parts of negotiating with the Palestinian Authority was for them to form a democratically elected parliament. They elected Hamas. Now, I'm not saying that Hamas is necessarily a really great party, but because we asked them to do this, are we not behind the fact that they've put Hamas in power? We've been neglecting the Palestinian Authority. We haven't given them a state, and we haven't even helped them on their way to find a solution here. And I think if we started to do that, if we started to help find them a solution, then maybe Hamas wouldn't be in power. But yes, we should be negotiating with Hamas as a political organisation, not as a terrorist group.
The woman at the back there in spectacles.
How can you call Hamas a terrorist organisation? Well, they reply to Israel bombing them and bombing on Lebanon. And how can you call them a terrorist organisation because they kill? Surely this government is a terrorist organisation for all the thousands of innocent civilians, women and children they have killed in Iraq.
Okay.
How can you say
Ed Miliband.
In the illegal war, it wasn't even...
All right, Ed Miliband.
Look, I think this is a very difficult issue because Hamas was part of a democratically or an elected government. But the thing I would say to the person who asked the question is, I don't think we can negotiate or have political conversations, discussions with Hamas at the moment because for two reasons, and Sayeeda said this. First of all, they don't recognise the State of Israel, and I think everyone agrees, I think most people agree anyway, that a two-state solution has to be the solution in Israel-Palestine, and Hamas doesn't recognise that. And secondly, they haven't renounced violence. And the answer to David's question about why is this different from Ireland for Britain is that we're not a party to the conflict in the Middle East. And if we move in now and say that we are going to start negotiating or having political contacts with Hamas, where will that leave Israel, and where will that leave our relationship with Israel and our ability to get the kind of Middle East solution that Charlie rightly says that we need to move on?
So when the Foreign Secretary, the new Foreign Secretary, I won't say he's your brother because it's totally irrelevant, but when he acknowledged what he called the crucial role played by Hamas, was he going down the wrong road, do you think? And when an early day motion signed by Alex Salmond saying we shouldn't preclude contact with Hamas, is that right or wrong, do you think?
Well, look, I don't think David was signalling a change in our approach to Hamas.
Okay.
You're so mean.
Davina McCall.
Ask him to talk about his brother. This is
blood brothers. I can't not ask him because it's his brother.
No,
He's the Foreign Secretary.
He keeps doing it. He keeps doing it.
Don't speak to a minister about his brother.
My opinion is, Poppy, let's get back to the question. That is, I think that wouldn't it be great some point in the future, whoever thought in our lifetime we'd see peace in Northern Ireland? I know we were involved in that in some way, but wouldn't it be great if at some point negotiations could happen, diplomacy could happen, and Israel and Palestine could join together and talk and try and work it out? I know this all seems mad, but I never thought there'd be peace in Northern Ireland in my time, and that we wouldn't be fearing terrorist bombings in London on a daily basis from the IRA. I just never thought that would happen, and it did. So these mad things could happen.
Okay, the woman there on the right, yes.
To say is no wonder Hamas was smiling yesterday. Britain has made a huge concession to them. We always said we would never negotiate with terrorists, yet the BBC mobilised a huge, who is supposed to be the British Broadcasting Corporation, mobilised a huge international movement to negotiate with these people. No wonder they were smiling. From their perspective, we've made a huge concession. Before it gets even further, we need to take back our firm stance against Hamas and ask them to release Gilad Shalit, get them to deal with the Israeli MIA.
That's right.
Otherwise...
So, just to clarify this, you don't think the BBC should have tried to get its reporter sprung? It should have left him imprisoned? Not with Hamas, it has to be said, but with another group within
Obviously,
Gaza?
the release of Alan Johnson is a good thing, but you have to it has to be taken into consideration that in order to secure that release, a lot of back channels, a lot of back doors were used, and Britain stood down from its stance. A concession has been made before. In 1948, Britain couldn't cope anymore, and it left Palestine. It left it in a mess. This time, we cannot make a mistake. We have to keep a firm line to get a secure and solid two-state solution for both countries to exist in harmony.
Okay. The man on the left there, yes, you sir, waving.
There's a real inconsistency in the way that most people treat, especially the last speaker and Douglas and others, treat Israel and Palestine. And that is actually, we support Israel, we sell them arms, we sell them weapons, we've continued to trade with Israel through the EU, and actually, Charlie, not only did we reject Hamas after they were democratically elected, but we actually cut off the budget of the Palestinian Authority. So we are not a neutral party in this. We've supported Israel for years, and I don't think that's been recognised by people in the debate so far.
And the person in the front here, in the very front row, in pale blue shirt.
Why should we be negotiating with a terrorist organisation? Because if we go easy on Hamas, surely they're just going to be pushing their borders further and further, using more terrorist techniques until they get what they want.
Okay. And you, not shaking your head in disagreement here. You disagree with what he said?
I think it has to be recognised that the suffragettes were a terrorist group. Nelson Mandela was a terrorist group. Thank God we negotiated with them. Thank God we got democracy for them.
Okay. And the woman there with spectacles on, yes, and I can't remember what row you're in, yes, with the scarf.
I think we absolutely need to be sympathetic to the Palestinian people. This is like the longest occupation in modern times. Yeah. Why would normal people decide to support like a terrorist group? Because they feel like they've got no other options. And we have supported Israel for so long and for way, way too long.
Douglas Murray?
Gaza is not occupied. And to make the equivalent between the suffragettes never got onto a bus and tried to blow it up and kill as many people as possible. If they did, women might not have the vote.
Okay. The man in blue there. I'll come to you, Charlie. Man in blue there.
Let's be clear. Hamas has a popular mandate to rule the Palestinian people. Does this mean that every Palestinian is a terrorist facilitator? Should we just eliminate all of them? Because by calling them a terrorist organization, you're obviating the possibility of negotiating with them. If you just call them a terrorist organization, they're in charge of the country. Does that mean we should wipe out Palestine?
Don't say they speak for the Palestinian people. Hamas and Palestinians are different.
They've been elected democratically.
OK, Charlie Bell.
Come in, yeah. OK, number one, they do speak for the Palestinian people because they were democratically elected. Secondly, and the other point...
Does he speak for you? He's in government.
Yes,
does
he does, because he was the majority. No, not all the time, but I support him because he is the government. Well, he isn't the government by himself.
He and the Foreign Secretary of the government.
Yeah, him and his brother rule our country, yeah. And on the other point that you made about the Gaza Strip not being occupied yet. No, it's not occupied anymore, but it is surrounded, and all exports are being controlled, and there's water controls, and the airspace is being controlled, and they don't have access to the sea. I'd call that an occupation just without the soldiers being there.
OK. Right. We're going to move on, but just before we move on, this is the last question time in this current series. Now, we're going to be back for aficionados of question time late in September in Brighton, where the Liberal Democrats are going to be having their conference. And it's worth just saying, if you'd like to come to that edition of question time, which is the next one, 09011114411 is the number to call, or you can go to our website, which is on the screen. I'll give the details later. And you can also download, as a video podcast, highlights of this programme from that website. Let's have a question, please, from Leo Gibbons-Plowright.
Gordon Brown has promised to listen to the people. So isn't it time he listened to the vast majority of university students and abandoned tuition fees?
Should he? I don't know whether the volume speaks volumes or whether there are some of you who disagree with that, but let's start with Sayeeda Warsi on this.
Yeah, I mean, obviously this is a really, really popular question, and any answer other than what you've said and agreeing with you is going to be completely unpopular. But we're on to a loser before we've started. I think in terms of tuition fees, it would be fantastic in an ideal world not to have tuition fees. It would be fantastic for students to go to university without having to come out with debt, without having to worry about how they're going to accommodate themselves, how they're going to feed themselves. But the financial reality and the real world is that at the end of the day, to ensure that university campuses stay open, that the breadth of courses that are available stay there and people have the opportunity to study various courses, tuition fees do exist. And therefore, I think to some extent we're left with very little choice, and certainly the Conservative position now is that we do have to support tuition fees.
And you worked with Michael Howard when he was against them. Now you've changed your view, have you?
Yes, we have. And
he has too, has he?
Well, I don't know about Michael's view, but the Conservative position now is that, yes, we do support tuition fees.
And what do you make of these changes that were announced today, giving more money for maintenance?
Yeah,
do you think that's a good thing, or are you against that too?
No, I welcome that. I think that the fact that more people are going to be given the opportunity to have help towards their accommodation and living costs, and the fact that you will have a break, the government's announcing, in paying back loans, if you do take loans out for tuition fees, is a good thing. But I do question why the government's saying they're doing this to try and have access for more students to go to university. But already people who are eligible because they have the right qualifications to go to university, 90% of them are already going to university. And I speak to a lot of young people who say, well, we don't want to go to university. We may want to study other courses, vocational courses. We may want to go into a training scheme. We might want to go into a job early. So I think the government needs to think very clearly about the targets that it's setting and whether those are the same targets as the targets that the young people want to set.
OK. Go on down here.
Friends who live in Scotland and go to Scottish university free. I've got friends who live in Wales and go to Welsh university free. I live in England. Why can't I go to an English university for free? Why should I have to pay?
The privileges of the Welsh and the Scottish. Davina McCall.
I think the improvements that were made today were really good, and apparently 2/3 of all students going to university from now on will receive grants in some shape or form, which has got to be a good thing. And a year's worth of tuition fees is £12,000, and what is asked from a student in Britain is £3,000. And actually that's quite a big difference, and I think you'll all agree that the standard of education that you can get here, higher education, our universities are brilliant, and there are queues and queues of people coming from abroad that want to... Somebody wasn't having it at uni. Queues of people wanting to come from outside and pay the full fee. So today's announcement's got to be a good thing, and repaying debt, I mean, it's going to be all improving universities, and also full bursaries are going to be awarded.
Are you in favour of tuition fees?
Well, yes, because it's going to mean better universities and bursaries. Bursaries have got to be a good thing where people that literally cannot afford, that really, really need help, can still go.
Okay. Charlie Bell.
Okay. Sorry. I think quite a big issue on this, which Sayeeda picked up on, we have no apprenticeships in this country anymore, and people who want to go on and study vocational courses aren't able to do so, and I think that was a massive mistake.
But that isn't the question. The question is,
I just wanted to pick
should
up on
Gordon, okay, but should Gordon Brown, in your view, listen to the vast majority of university students and abandon tuition? You're about to go to university yourself.
I am, and I'm petrified. I'm studying medicine, and I have no idea how I'm going to be able to fund it. Yes, 2/3 of students are going to get a grant, but it's going to be a pittance of a grant. I'm afraid 3% extra of the population are going to benefit now. I think, yeah, it is time for us to relook at this issue. Government should be providing more funding for university. They want 50% of the population to go to university. If this is a policy they want to bring through, they can't expect us to pay. It's going to be £10,000, the university suggested today.
Okay, the man here on the second row. Sorry, we're going to come back to you in a minute.
How come a country as poor as Greece can still afford to send all its students to free university, and we can't even do the same here?
Ed Miliband.
I can't answer on the. I can't answer on the situation in Greece. I don't know about the situation in Greece. Let me just say something.
How do you know the situation in Greece? I mean, assuming you're right on this.
Yes, I've got a guitar teacher who's
You've got a guitar teacher.
It's a reliable source, and I've been to Greece, and that is the case.
Okay.
I trust you. I believe you. Look, on the changes announced today, it's designed to make it more affordable for people, because we do recognise the issue of people worrying about getting into debt, and we want to have more grants for more people, and we also want to have repayment holidays so people can stop repaying their fees after they go to university, if they want to take time off from work, or all kinds of other things.
What about the fundamental point about abandoning tuition fees
Let me come on to
altogether?
the fundamental point. Look, in an ideal world with unlimited money, it would be a nice thing to do. But I'll just tell you honestly, if we're thinking about the future of education in this country and where we want to put our investment, I can't say that the biggest priority is to put more money into universities. I think a bigger priority, I'm afraid, is to put more money into schools and childcare and all the other things that make a difference.
The man in blue there, in the centre. You, sir.
What's the difference between people in Scotland and people in England? Why don't they pay tuition fees and we have to pay tuition fee if we live in UK and it's all about equal opportunities?
And you needed the Scottish MPs' votes to get this through, didn't you, in the House of Commons, who weren't affected by it?
Do you want me to answer that?
I'm just making a comment.
All right.
You can answer it, yes, you can answer it.
No, I mean, look, the answer on Scotland is that they get to make their own decisions about education. They made a decision to put more money into universities and less money elsewhere. That was their decision.
And the Scottish MPs decided that English students would pay tuition fees.
Do you want to get into the West Lothian question?
No, I'm just mentioning. Douglas.
Well, there's a couple of points made on this one. One is that social mobility is generally agreed now to have been down from where it was even 40 years ago or so. That is, the university, which was the way in which people, if they came from a very poor background and were very gifted, got out of that situation, was university, was grammar schools, incidentally, as well, which Baroness Warsi's party have opposed more of. It was grammar schools, university, a whole generation of people who came that way, and that's now going, partly because of the tuition fees, which put so many people off going to university. But this has happened at the same time as a drive to get more and more people into university as an unmitigated good. Mr. Blair put this figure at 50%. We want to get 50%. If 50% of people want to go to university, you want to get that figure, why not 60, 70? Why not have 100%? It's a ridiculous idea. Most people should not go to universities. They should be elite institutions where people go to study certain things. They are not for everybody. And on the Scottish question...
No, just stick with that one for a minute. Davina.
I was just wondering what right you have to tell people who should go to university and who shouldn't go to
I'm saying anyone should. No. I'm saying anyone should who's gifted, but you shouldn't force people. I'm saying anyone who's gifted
Did you say who's
go.
gifted?
Anyone who's gifted should go, who wants to go to university.
I'm not gifted, but I would have loved to have gone to university. I chose not to, actually, but it's a decision that I made just because I'm not gifted. I mean, what do you consider to be
I'm
gifted?
saying there are some people who are suitable for university and some people who don't go to university and have perfectly great careers without it. It's not necessary. You don't force people to do it.
Douglas, you made the point about social mobility. When you look at the percentage of people from poorer backgrounds going to university today, it is still pitifully low. Now, the question is, Do you want fewer people from middle-class backgrounds to go to university than do now, and therefore the number to stay the same, or do you want the numbers to go up? I personally think the numbers. I personally think the numbers could go up, but it's the right thing to do socially and economically. Every other country we're competing with is seeing numbers going to 50, 60%, and I think it's the way of the future.
Okay, there are a lot of hands up, and some. Have you spoken before? I'm going to go to people who haven't spoken. You have spoken already, have you? Go on then.
Sorry, I was saying I'm a student pilot at the moment, and I'm finding it extremely a student pilot, and I'm finding it extremely hard just because I'm wanting to do something different to find any sort of funding to get there, and it is really, really difficult. Why is the government not funding people like me to go on to do something like that?
Flying, you're learning to fly, yeah. And you, sir, yeah, yes, you.
I accept that you need to pay fees, but even in the time I've been at university. Fees have gone from £1,000 then to £3,000, and now I hear today they might go to £6,000. Do you think that's a fair rate of increase?
How are you affected by what Mr. Miliband was talking about, which is the delay in repaying for 5 years? Well, if you want to have a house, get married, buy a house or something, you can. Well, they can't buy a house in 5 years or something, but anyway. But the delay in payment, does that affect you?
I'm not sure how that would affect me, but I'm just saying, do they think that the rate of the increase in tuition fees is fair?
Okay, and let's go. I want to hear some more points. You sir, in the fourth row there. Yes, you. Yeah, it's you. Yeah, don't look so surprised.
Just two points very quickly. I'm English and I go to a Scottish university, and I think it's completely unfair that I pay fees, but yet my Scottish friends don't. And my second point is I must actually agree with Douglas, strangely enough, in that.
I'm sorry.
The problem's mine, I apologise. This figure, I completely agree with you. This figure of 50% is absolutely nonsense because it's going to demote what a degree actually means, and it means that people are then going to have to go out. If 50% of everyone has a degree, it means a degree is worthless because everyone's going to have to go out and get a second degree and get in debt twice, like you see in America.
Exactly. Adding to that point, to Ed. We're looking at new GCSEs that are being brought in this year. The science GCSEs are not science. They're about the issues surrounding science. How are we going to provide the people going to university who need to study these more complicated courses if they're going in and they're simply unable to understand the material? Surely our R&D is going to be seriously sort of damaged by us dumbing down these GCSEs.
The woman in grey there.
University, I'll be studying 4 hours a week. I'd like to know what my tuition fee is actually paying for.
Sorry. I missed the first part of that. You
4 hours a week.
When you get in my final year, I'll be having 4 hours teaching time.
Why only 4 hours?
Because that's what they give you.
Right.
What course are you on?
What I was just going to say.
What are you studying for 4 hours a week?
Okay, I'll take one more point for the man in the blue T-shirt with the pale blue bits. No, the man behind you. Yeah, no, you've got. He's this man in stripes.
Following on from Douglas's point, I think that he's right about the gifted students. I don't see the point in thousands of people going to such a university to study media when, in the real world, it's not going to get them anywhere. I think the introduction of tuition fees.
At the moment, we have more photography students studying in Britain than we actually need in the whole of Western Europe. And that's what I mean by saying we need to start looking at what it is that young people want to do, what it is that this country actually needs, and create opportunity and choices for people to actually be able to choose whether they want to go to university, train, go into a job, an apprenticeship, whatever.
Vocational training.
Yeah, vocational training.
You done? Yeah. Right. Let's go on to another question. Tim Coates, please. Tim Coates. Hold on a second. Can you just start again? Yeah.
Following Gordon Brown's list of proposals for constitutional reform, should the voting age be lowered to 16?
Should the voting age be lowered to 16? It's one of the things that is being considered. Well, you can shout yes and no, but let's... Charlie Bell, you answer it.
Yes.
Okay.
Can I carry on?
Yeah, I can carry on. I've got more to say.
Yes, I think there's a common argument that, you only reach adulthood when you get to 18 and, people won't be ready to vote. If people are interested enough in politics to vote at age 16, then they should be allowed to vote at age 16, and the means should be there to vote at age 16. I think there's a real discrepancy between ages of driving, drinking, and voting, and we're allowed to send... troops aren't allowed to go into combat, but they're allowed to join the armed forces at age 16. And if you're not allowed to vote when you're a member of the armed forces, there's got to be something seriously wrong with the democratic society.
Okay. Sayeeda Warsi.
Yeah, I think it's quite an interesting proposition, and I think I want to kind of have a look at the research as to just how many 16-year-olds would actually use their vote if they were given it at 16. For me, the bigger issue is all those people who are above the age of 18, 60-odd% of them, who just don't bother voting at local or national elections. And that's the bigger issue. It's not about whether we give those extra 2 years, people from the age of 16 to 18, the right to vote. It's about engaging people who already have the right to vote to actually come out and use it.
But why would you want to know whether 16 to 18-year-olds would vote or not?
Well, there was some information from the Law Commission which basically said that actually lowering the age was not going to engage young people in more politics, because people are not turned off politics because they can't vote at the age of 18, but they're turned off politics because of politicians.
Do you agree with that?
No,
you.
Do I agree with that?
Yes, what it is.
I think young people are turned off politics because of politicians. I mean, I hear young people all the time saying, well, you go on there, you drone about this, you have a party line, you stick to it, you're all boring, you all fight each other. I mean, it doesn't feel engaging. You don't feel as if your voices are being heard. And one of the big concerns, really, I think that I hear from people is that, well, it doesn't really matter if you vote because nothing really changes. And that's why I think we need to seriously look at moving more power back to local communities and allow them the rights to make decisions for their local communities.
Okay. Davina McCall, famously, people say more people voted in Big Brother than for the general election. I don't know where they get the figure from, but under 34, I've got this figure, just under 6 million people voted at the last general election, and just over 6 million voted in Big Brother. I don't know whether they're all under 34 or not. Are they?
Probably.
Probably.
I wouldn't imagine anybody over 34 would want to watch Big Brother.
Oh, I voted 10 times.
Yay! Well done, David. It's a tragedy, and I looked into doing a television programme. I was sort of touting it around, trying to do a television programme for the last election where I could try and galvanise young people to vote. But nobody wanted to take it on because it's a very complex issue, because you have to give every single political party equal time, and all the television stations are very nervous about doing it. But because I can't think that any young person would tune into, you know, sort of vote for your party or whatever the programme would have been called, I was going to call it My Boobs Are Too Big, because I thought maybe somebody might tune in to Davina McCall's Boobs Are Too Big. And then I was going to come on at the beginning and go,
Can we end the plug, please, and get to the question?
Did you like it? Did you like it, though?
It's a good plug, but what's your view?
My view is, I don't think that people are interested in voting because it doesn't tune into what they're interested in. But Tim...
So you don't think any of this audience who are under 16 will want to vote?
But Tim, what would make...
You're 16.
What would make 16-year-olds vote? Well, then let me ask you in the front row.
Vote if they saw people more their own age in the political parties. You don't see anybody our age that are in them to represent
in as a member of parliament.
It's not in a member of parliament, but where you go into your council, you don't see anybody.
Can I say, what's your name?
Charlotte.
Charlotte, do it.
Okay, right. Well, wait a minute. I want somebody who hasn't spoken. Yes. Have you spoken already? No. What do you think? 16 to 18 is what we're talking about.
I think it's a great idea. The reality is that if we lower the voting age, even if those people don't vote, we give them ownership of government and politics, and that is the first step towards engaging them and making them feel part of the community.
And the woman there in the fourth row, you, yes. What's your view? No, behind you.
I think we need to open up the voting age 16-year-olds. We've got a Children's Commission that's meant to stand up for our rights. He's not done anything politically or in the media to get young people involved in politics. So yes, we do need. The only way to make it open is to engage people, and that's the only way to do that is to open it to 16-year-olds. Why not? Why not?
Yeah. Are you 16?
No, I'm 19.
Oh, so
but I was involved in campaigning at 16 to get the age limit. No, right. Why not? Can you give a good answer? Why not?
Douglas Murray.
Well, firstly, I'd agree with Mr. Bell on the issue of the anomaly of the armed forces, which is a very curious one. I agree should be rectified. Sayeeda Warsi wanted to know how many young people would vote, and I'd like to see that figure as well. I'd also be interested to see how they were going to vote, judging on the audience tonight, among other things, if they were going to put up a candidate, certain people in the hall would vote for Hamas. So I'd like to know where they voted, and there's a certain age at which I think...
What are you saying? That you would deny people the vote because you disapproved of the way they'd vote?
If it turned out they were wanting to vote for green, lefty, liberal parties, yeah, I'd wait till they're 18. Wait till they're 18.
It's like Panto. I love it here. Can I come back?
Ed Miliband. There's a serious version of democracy on the other side of the table.
I personally am in favour of votes at 16. I think it's got to be accompanied by much better citizenship education, because the young people I've talked to say that citizenship education is really boring, is about institutions, and which even politicians find boring, and not about issues, and that's got to happen. And I also think we've got to do a much better job as politicians of hearing the voices of young people. Charlotte, I think it is, at the front, is absolutely right about this. There need to be more young councillors. And one thing that we have done is to give young people a bit more control over youth services and how money is spent in local areas. But the final thing I'd say to you is that if you're in favour of it, and it sounds like the audience is, you need to take part in the consultations that we will have on this, because you will need to persuade my colleagues and others that this is the right thing to do.
I also feel that youngsters, if we showed 16-year-olds some respect and of your attitudes and your views, then we'd get that same respect back, and that's very important to society.
OK, I'll take a couple more points. The woman here in the front.
I don't think
yes.
I don't think the voting age should be lowered to 16, because speaking from experience, when I was 16, I commenced on an A2 A-level course for politics. I know lots of my friends who didn't take politics, didn't even know the leaders of the three parties, they didn't know their constituency MP. This audience is not reflective of the general young population, because a lot of us are politics students, and we may be better than ourselves. I also don't think that 16-year-olds are necessarily, especially considered by the government, mature enough to vote at 16, because not only are they not educated enough, as Ed said. Sorry, Mr. Miliband.
He likes Ed,
Ed's fine.
But also, like, the government is suggesting now they lowered the age you can buy cigarettes, they increased the age you can buy cigarettes up to 18, and I also don't think 16-year-olds should be in the army. I know they can be drafted, but I don't think it should be, because you're still referring to them as children. Therefore, it's wrong to put children in the army.
OK, and the man there in blue and red.
Yeah, the lady in the front row said there should be more young people in politics, and many of them are. I myself was a member of the Youth Parliament. There's over 400 members of the Youth Parliament, and in the elections, 400,000 young people vote. I think that showed that young people are interested.
Okay. I hear that Gordon Brown, as Prime Minister, wants to invite the Youth Parliament to the House of Commons. Have you heard that? The debate there. We've got time for just one more question. Simon Neville, please. Simon Neville, quick answers will be needed. Yes.
Boris Johnson for Mayor of London. Stroke of genius or complete liability?
Okay.
Charlie Bell.
Both, and good luck to him. I think it'd be hilarious.
Davina McCall.
I'm completely with Charlie on that one. It would be absolutely hilarious. Down with congestion charge for the outer zones. But I think London would probably just fall apart, wouldn't it? But maybe he could change the Olympic logo. Change the Olympic logo!
You certainly know how to tap into it. Douglas Murray.
I think he'd be a great mayor. We couldn't have a worse one, of course. I would say it would be slightly worrying in the case of an absolute catastrophe. Widely, people see him as a figure of fun. He's a much more serious person than that. But then, I mean, we have a comedian in at the moment, so Boris Johnson can only be an improvement.
OK, Ed Miliband.
I think London is one of the few cities he hasn't insulted. While he's been a politician, I'm afraid I think he'd be a bit of a liability, but he's a great character.
OK. And Sayeeda Warsi, do you want to see him go from the party to the run for the mayor?
I think he'd make a fantastic man. He'd be such great fun, and I think he'd really connect with people, because he does connect with people in a big way, but it's got to be Boris's decision.
You don't think Mr Cameron's trying to push him out that way?
Oh, God, no, it was Boris who actually kind of raised all of this.
Oh,
and
right.
said,
Okay.
I may, you know...
Brief point from you, sir? Yes.
I think Ken Livingstone's done an amazing job, and he's managed to inspire...
OK.
Some of his anti-bullying work that he's been leading has inspired my school in Milton Keynes, so I think he's done superb.
But do you think Boris should challenge him?
I personally think Boris is a bit of an idiot, so I don't think he should go.
OK, all right. That's on that unhappy note. Since he's regularly on this panel, we come to the end of this edition of Question Time. We're not back until September. Now, one other thing, if you want to continue the debate that we've had here, of course, you can do it on the website. You can also put questions to Davina McCall, who's agreed to answer them. I'd like to... Did you know you've done that?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah,
I'm scared. I'm scared.
I'd just like to thank the panel. I'd particularly like to thank Charlie Bell and... and also all the other students, some of whom are here in the audience, who were involved in the production of this very special edition of Question Time. There's going to be another Schools Question Time next year, and in the autumn, it's time to apply. So if you want to get involved in the next year's one, if you want to fight to get onto the panel or fight to control the programme in the way that these students have tonight.